for drivers over 20. So we'll run through the details of that announcement, take any questions on that topic, then Gerry can leave and we can move on to other matters that you might want to discuss. So today Cabinet agreed that we intend to lower the legal blood alcohol concentration from 80 to 50 milligrams of alcohol per 100 millilitres of blood for drivers aged over 20. Cabinet has decided that the lower limit, 51 to 80 micrograms, will be dealt with under an infringement regime. Gerry will go into the details of that shortly. You will recall that in 2010 we considered the same proposal but deferred lowering the limit until further research was done into the impact of that 30 milligram reduction. The provisional results show that reducing the adult limit would prevent on average 3.4 fatalities and 64 injuries through crashes each year and save around about $200 million in social costs over 10 years. Cabinet has also made the decision to reduce the amount for a variety of reasons. These include the international trend to reduce limits, the weight of public opinion, and the research that indicates overall widespread benefits. What this decision means is that you will still be able to have a couple of drinks with dinner when you go out. It's not going to prevent your ability to engage in normal social activity. But it does send a message that we are serious about alcohol-related harm on our roads. Before I hand over to Gerry, I just want to quickly reinforce this government's strong record on road safety. Now into the fourth year of the government's Safer Journeys road safety strategy, we're tracking towards the lowest road toll in recent times. The number of people dying on our roads has reduced almost 40% in the last 4 years. In 2008, the road toll was in the high 300s. In 2011, it was high 200s. And in 2012, it was a bit over that. What this means is that more than 100 fewer people are likely to die on the roads this year than in 2009. This is no coincidence. Younger drivers have been a focus for the government. We've brought in tougher testing, raised the driving age, and a zero blood alcohol limit for under 20s, as well as other initiatives including banning cell phones while driving, and of course investing billions of dollars into building better and safer roads. So it's particularly pleasing that from 2010 to 2012 we saw a 44% decrease in deaths for 15 to 19-year-olds and a 48% decrease in the number of 20 to 24-year-olds dying on our roads. The work is not over. No death is acceptable. That is why we've made the decision today. So we'll hand over to Gerry, he can give you some more details, then we'll take any questions you have on this topic, then we can carry on with the normal weekly business.
Thank you, Prime Minister. So just at the risk of repeating some of what the Prime Minister has said, can I say at the outset that in determining the policy today, the Cabinet was very mindful of the need to strike a balance between the desire to indicate that we want people being more cautious about the level of alcohol in their blood when they get behind a wheel, and in fact determining that they are at a criminal point. And so it's appropriate that between 51 and 80 micrograms per litre of blood alcohol, that $200 fine applies with 50 demerit points as well. It should be noted that if someone does offend twice in a 2-year period, then that will result in the loss of a licence. And of course the demerit points, 50 a time, takes care of that. The data we've seen shows that drivers who do drink to excess, particularly recidivist drivers, are responsible for most of the deaths that occur where alcohol is involved. But in wanting to send that message and being sympathetic to where public opinion has certainly run very quickly over the last couple of years, we believe that the fine-based approach at the lower end is the most appropriate. There are also measures in place to target high-risk and recidivist drivers, such as the alcohol interlocks, which have been in place now for just 1 year. A little too soon to determine how successful they have been, but nonetheless they are an important tool in trying to get people to think and drive more responsibly. And alongside that, there is also the prospect of confiscation of vehicles, and a number of vehicles are confiscated each year. As the Prime Minister has already said, there is more work being done, and we've asked our officials to report to us during next year on the range of penalties that exist across all categories of drunk driving. also have, of course, the very significant educational program that's out there at the moment. Most of you will be familiar with the Ghost Chips line, and we're sure that that is having an effect particularly on younger drivers, and we're seeing good success with the number of young people with alcohol in their bloodstream lowering from the 2009 figure by about 24%. Today's announcement is just part of a wider plan to make our roads a lot safer. You'll be aware that in recent times we've changed the restraint laws and also illegal street racing laws. Those are just examples of the ongoing commitment that we're making to making our roads safer for those who drive responsibly. Happy to take any questions.
What do you say to, I guess there'll be some people living in rural areas who perhaps have driven some distance to get to a pub for a couple of beers and now thinking they don't have the option of taxis or whatever, that this is a bit draconian?
Well, one of the things that's most interesting is that the AA, which has a very wide reach and has its own rural grouping within it, have supported this lowering. And while they said they didn't want up to 80 milligrams to be a criminal offence, they were quite prepared to accept that it should be an infringement offence. So we think we've answered that requirement pretty well.
When did the government get the research back?
The research has come back in the last 6 to 8 weeks. I'm not exactly sure, but it's while you say it's not totally compelling, what it does indicate is that if there are less drunk drivers or less people on the road impaired by alcohol, then you'll have less injuries and less deaths. But the injuries are quite significant alongside those deaths as well. So on balance, we think this is the right thing to do.
And how will you do this? Introduce new legislation? You won't use Ian Galloway's bill?
Well, look, while I'd recognise that Mr. Galloway has, at least Galloway has stimulated the degree of public debate, his bill is a member's bill, and the assessment of it is that it would need very, very substantial altering to achieve the government's desires here. It would require more than 57 changes that would be effective on the land transport bill. So we think having a government bill that has a proper backing to it and looks at all of those consequential change and savings is the best way that we move forward.
And when would you hope to get that through?
Well, it will be introduced as soon as it's been through the full cabinet process, so that means going to its each committee, cabinet, etc. But I would expect it to be read in the House before the end of the year.
So this will probably be in place next year sometime?
Well, it will go to a select committee for the full select committee treatment. It depends on how long that select committee takes to deal with it.
So you haven't considered the idea of getting this through before Christmas? It's the most dangerous period of the year, isn't it?
Well, it potentially is, but I think we're seeing good signs that people are a lot more conscious now than has been the case in the past. So I don't think we should rush this sort of legislation. I've said all along that we need to be very careful about making sure that New Zealanders understood where their bounds lay on something like this. So the awareness will certainly be there for this Christmas season, but the law won't be passed, and frankly nor would the private members bill either if it comes up this side of Christmas.
How much will the fine be for someone who is caught in that level between 50 and 80? How much?
At this stage it's proposed to be $200, but the select committee may have a different view on that. Would also attract 50 demerit points at the same time.
So what do you sort of, what are the argument that someone says, oh, if I get caught it's only $200?
Well, I mean, if they're caught twice, it's loss of licence. And I think the societal pressure is what it's all about. You could equally have people at the moment saying, look, if I get caught, I lose my licence for 3 months and it's a $500 fine.
So what's your understanding of how much an average male, for example, can drink and not be over that 50 limit?
It's a very difficult question to answer because as your own, in the case of TV1 Close Up or TV3 Campbell Live shows have recently shown, it depends entirely on the body shape of the individual concerned. So we would expect that it won't affect people having a drink after work or having a wine over dinner.
So how many drinks do you recommend that the average Kiwi has before driving now under this?
Well, I'm not in a position to make that recommendation. I mean, I personally think that 1 or 2 would probably be okay, but beyond that, you'd be starting to get into dangerous territory.
And what representations have police made to the government since the passing of the alcohol reform bill on this matter? Have they applied any pressure?
No. There was the comment the other day from Cliff, but that was just a reaction to a private members bill, nothing more.
What would have been the costs in the court system or delays in the court system if you'd chosen to go down the criminal charges route rather than fines?
Hard to assess that because it depends entirely on the number of people who would be caught at any one time or over any given period. So the estimates are that they might find several thousand people a year over 0.5 who would end up in the courts, but it's one of those how long is a piece of string type questions.
So
The real issue was, should you make someone a criminal for an activity that is not criminal at the moment, or should you say, look, we want to send, for a period of time at least, a strong deterrent from people drinking to those levels, and so we'll put an infringement upon it.
So you think this will probably pick up about 1,000 people a year?
No, it could be many, many more. I don't know. Could be many less would be the ideal.
When you say for a period of time, does that indicate that this is a trial, or that at some point in the future you may step up the sanctions?
Well, you know that one parliament's not bound by another.
So you think that this is only temporary as long as you're in office?
No, I don't think so. No, I think it's one of those things that will have to be assessed, and what we've said is that we would want to see the penalty review taken over the next 3 years. We've asked our officials to do that, and obviously in 3 years' time, if that review is completed, in fact it would be 4 years from about now, the government of the day may have a view about that.
So has your hand been forced by Ian Lee's Galloway's bill? If the government didn't act, he may well have got that through.
No, we've had a timeline that's been in place since 2009, and we've stuck pretty closely to it, and I've made it clear all through this year, when I've been asked by many of you, that we would be making some announcement on this by the end of the year. We're here.
You lose your licence federal twice, how long do you lose it?
Look, I can't answer that. It depends on what the shape of the bill comes back in from the select committee. But if you lose it through the merit point system, it's 3 months. 3 months, yeah.
Prime Minister, are you comfortable New Zealanders will accept this? They won't think this is a government sort of being a bit wowserish?
No, I think, look, on balance, they'll probably think we've got it about right. In other words, there's a period now, and that might last many, many, many years, or maybe even forever, where there will just simply be an infringement notice and demerit points, and then the criminalisation above 0.08. And I think they'll think that's about right. The international trend and the sort of view of New Zealanders, I think, is that they want to see the roads a bit safer, and historically, it depends on the individual, but we've certainly seen you can consume a lot of alcohol and still be legally under 0.08 for a great many people, and so that is dangerous. We know that their decision making is much poorer at those levels. So we still believe that people will be able to have a drink after work, as long as they're sensible about what they're doing. They'll be totally fine and abound in the new rules.
Do you guys even drive after having a small amount of alcohol, or do you?
I don't, but I'm in the privileged position of having dial-a driver with me the whole time, in the form of my police. But like post politics, no, I won't. I mean, I'd be comfortable having one beer or two. I wouldn't be comfortable having any more than that. But I certainly believe under both the old rules and the new rules, having 1 or 2 beers, I'd be well and truly under the legal.
Is that the same with you, Minister?
Would be the same.
Which drivers are you hoping to target here?
Well, I don't think it's a matter of targeting any specific group of drivers. What we do know is that the deaths for the under-20s has, in fact under-24s, has fallen since the zero tolerance for under-20s, along with the injuries. So what we would expect is that this is a pretty big societal signal that consuming alcohol at high levels is not an advisable thing if you're going to get behind the wheel of a car, and it's a stronger way than it's been done in the past.
You talked about an international trend. What other countries have infringement systems like this?
Well, there are 89, so it's too many for me to list, but I'm sure if you contact my office, I'll give you that list.
Before Mr. Brownlee goes, can I just ask you a quick question about Christchurch? Are you planning to make any announcements in the Christchurch East area before the by-election?
No, not particularly. What were you thinking? Is there something that might get us over the line?
Well, advice costs a bit more than questions, but I just wonder in the light of the moves that the Labour Party is obviously making to harvest votes over there.
Well, I think there's a couple of things. So the comments they made about New Brighton, for example, all of that is underway. So there's nothing new in that. It's pretty pretty evident if you go down there. There's going to be a high level of urban renewal. There's been engagement with the City Council over the sporting facilities and what's required down there. And the other reality is that anyone who lives in Christchurch will know that ever since Saturday trading came in, Brighton has had a difficulty in carving a niche for itself. So it is an opportunity to look at significant urban renewal as well as the wider community issues that exist down there as well. But none of what was announced at the weekend was particularly new.
Okay.
Yeah,
So look, just in terms of the House of the Week, we're going to look to progress the Telecommunications Interception Capability and Security Bill, the New Zealand International Convention Centre Bill and Social Housing Reform Bill, Housing Restructuring and Tenancy Matters Amendment Bill. In terms of my activity, it's a normal House week, so I'll be here for question time tomorrow and Wednesday. Thursday I'll be in Ringatiki, and Friday the National Party's holding a one-day full caucus policy meeting at Premier House. Questions?
Just on the so-called Ghostbusters group, are you concerned of the police's failure to investigate that?
Well, firstly, I guess as a parent, I find the issue very disturbing and abhorrent, really. I mean, you're talking about youngsters who are at a very delicate age. My view is that the activity of naming particular young women would, under the new law that the government's introducing, which is the Harmful Digital Communications Bill, mean that behaviour would be unlawful. But it's actually a bigger issue than that, and it's just extremely disturbing and disgusting behaviour, and these young guys should grow up.
But the police and schools seem to have known about it for some time and nothing's been done.
Yeah, and that's because it is very difficult, actually, to progress these issues if someone isn't prepared to make a formal complaint, and it's a very challenging situation for a young woman to put herself in that position. She would be subject to a full and open process, and that's very challenging at the very delicate years for these young girls. So you can't blame them, but it's also very difficult legally for the police to progress the issue without that.
Do you think Facebook has a responsibility to block or take down these sites?
Well, I think that's the sort of thing where over time we need to continue to look at those matters, and that's really, the reason this would fall within the Harmful Digital Communications Bill is it would be seen as cyberbullying, and that's the provision under which the name disclosure would fit. In a way, it's probably more for governments to try and set the boundaries here than probably the internet providers. But if it is at all possible for them to look at the situation, it would be useful. And you do from time to time see them removing what they describe as offensive comments off their sites.
Just on a possible royal visit, any ideas of when that might be?
Yeah, but I can't tell you about it. So look, the long and short of it is there may well be a royal visit next year. I can't absolutely be sure of that one way or the other. What I can tell you is that there are established protocols about royal visits in election year, and I would expect those protocols to be followed. In other words, I will follow them, and that is if a royal visit takes place around an election, then you would reach out and get bipartisan support for that. But if it happens well and truly outside of the election period, that sort of 3 months is probably how to define it, then there's nothing new about that taking place, and we wouldn't need bipartisan support. So for every election of the last 5 elections, we have had royal visitors to New Zealand. So, for example, the Queen came in February 2002, the Prince of Wales visited in March 2005, the Duke of York visited in 2005, the Princess Royal visited in 99, 2002 and 2008, the Duke of Cambridge came in 2005. So we've had lots of visitors in the election period, but it's only really if they come in that sort of 3-month window that you need bipartisan support, I believe.
Does potential visit there a factor in when you decide to call the election?
No.
Why is that?
Well, I just don't think it'll be effective.
David Campbell says it's just another chance for you to have a photo opportunity with the Royals. It can't go to the White House next year and do the same. Are you going to try and maximise these opportunities in election year?
No, I mean we may well go to the White House next year, but that would be subject to an invitation from President Obama and fitting his schedule and mine. And I can't be sure whether that will happen or not. As I previously said, kind of broadly speaking, I reckon it's sort of a once in a term visit to the White House, because we see the President at other times of the East Asian Summit in April when he can attend. So if it's possible, it'd be great if it happens next year, but if it doesn't, it won't, and it's no real big deal if that doesn't take place. But you know, it's always good to have a discussion. We've got plenty of things to talk about. You know, as we're TPP, we'll be at that point. In reality, you know, these things are not about. I don't think someone votes for you because they see a member of the royal family turn up in New Zealand, or because they you know, see the Prime Minister at the White House. You know, they're fairly stock standard.
Would you quite like baby George come to New Zealand next year though?
Well, you're making the assumption that's the royal visitors that could come, but if he was to be one of the touring party, he'd be more than welcome.
Because Prince William has indicated that he would quite like to come to New Zealand and Australia next
Yep,
year,
he has.
so you'd quite like it to happen too.
Well, I'm more than happy for the Duke and Duchess to come anytime they want to come to New Zealand. As if it's an election period, then we'll follow normal protocols. But whether William and Kate next year come to New Zealand, or William and Kate come next year to New Zealand, let's see how that goes.
Would you consider taking them to New Zealand close?
No.
Why not?
Well, that's really just the leader of the opposition. You know, really not showing due respect, I think, to a royal visit. I mean, that's a political issue, and they don't come to New Zealand for political reasons. That's the metaphor that he's trying to demonstrate here. You know, they come to do a whole lot of different things, and I wouldn't politicise their visit by going to a place that I've been to, you know, during making a political statement.
You think
When
Prince
do you
William might want to
envision the
emulate
election
that?
happening, Prime Minister?
Sorry?
When do you envision the election happening?
2014.
No, do you intend going full stream? I mean, you could go to December or later if you need to.
Haven't made that decision.
Do you
Yes.
think that Prince William quite likes the idea of maybe emulating that fuzzy bee moment from 30 years ago?
He might. I don't know. I haven't discussed that issue.
Have you firmed up the possibility of a visit of Chinese President Lee? Would that affect the timing of the election? Would it be post-round?
So again, that hasn't been determined. I mean, I don't know when the Chinese leadership will have an opportunity to come to New Zealand, but if they do, they'd be more than welcome.
I thought he indicated at APEC that he would come after the visit to Sydney for the
G20, probably G20. Yeah. Again, look, it's possible, and the G20 takes place in November, but that's also true of many leaders.
What's the government's position on New Zealand Post's request for more capital for Kiwibank?
Well, I know that's something that the finance ministers are looking at. I mean, those proposals have been on table, have been for some time. I don't know whether they've reached any conclusion about whether they think it's a good idea.
Labour and the Greens have kind of suggested that
Got close.
perhaps you're a bit more attached to the Royals than previous Prime Ministers. Would you say that's the case?
I don't know. David Cunliffe came in under Royal, didn't